Well, in terms of nuts and bolts personnel talk, the big story is, of course, the 4 opt-outs for the Buckeyes: Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Nicholas Petit-Frere, and Haskell Garrett, the big 4 starters moving on to their NFL preparation. So if you can go kind of position by position to line us up with what do you anticipate in regards to this guy stepping up and what the shuffle looks like.
Yeah, it was interesting talking to Utah defensive coordinator Morgan Scalley yesterday. I asked him, as a defensive coordinator, do you have a sigh of relief when you see Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave opting out? And he laughed and he said no, because they still have talent behind them, and it's still the Ohio State offense. So, yeah, I'm sure he lies a little bit about that. Like, of course, you have to be like, I'm so glad we don't have to play those guys, because that's just reality. But there is still depth behind them, and right now it looks like Julian Fleming in for Chris Olave, which he did last year in the Big Ten championship game, and I believe also one other game this year. Then Marvin Harrison will be starting. He's been running with the ones for Garrett Wilson. So, yeah, you replace 2 of the top 10 Ohio State receivers of all time with the son of an NFL Hall of Famer and the number 1 receiver in the 2020 class. Now, it's a huge opportunity for both of those guys, including Emeka Egbuka. Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to stay in the slot, but he can move around, and you can get Emeka Egbuka in there in the slot as well, however you want to do it. But Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison, I look for those 2 guys to have the biggest days of their career. And for Fleming, that was, I think, 4 catches for 53 yards in last year's Big Ten championship game. I think he has 7 catches for 51 yards this year. I wouldn't be shocked if he has more than 7 catches, and I would be very, very surprised if he doesn't have more than 53 yards receiving or 51 yards receiving. He should double his season totals. Marvin Harrison has a handful of catches as well. I don't know that I'm expecting 100 yards out of each of these guys, but it wouldn't shock me if somebody does. Like, Ohio State's going to throw the ball, and they can't just throw to Jackson Smith-Njigba. I mean, even though he does have a 15-catch game this year, but you're going to have to utilize those guys on the outside. And Ohio State's going to throw the ball how many times? Like 40, and complete 30-plus of them. So those guys are going to get some numbers. So with Wilson or with Marvin Harrison and Fleming, I expect both of those guys to do well. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, who knows, 12 catches for 170 yards. But he'll be matching up against Utah's best defensive back and Clark Phillips, the former Ohio State corner. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. They will miss them, but it's still a very talented Ohio State room, just really inexperienced guys. This is the biggest game that any of these receivers have played in terms of just how much they're going to be relied upon. Jackson Smith-Njigba played in all of those games last year, but he is now like the guy, so this is going to be a big opportunity for him. Talking about the receivers, I asked Kevin Wilson yesterday, like, what is your level of excitement to see these young guys? He's like, don't worry about my level of excitement. The concern is the level of excitement of the players and how they might start playing with jitters early on. It's the Rose Bowl. They're starting. Do they squeeze the ball too tight when they try to catch it? Do they drop some passes? And I asked him, do you have to build in those mistakes into the game plan, like give them something easy to do beforehand or, early on? He's like, you can't do that. They got to continue to be aggressive like they always are, because Utah has a ball control offense. And if you are conservative and then you give the ball back to Utah, they can keep the ball for ungodly minutes and limit your possession. So Ohio State's going to remain as aggressive as they normally are and just hope for the best.